am the spiritual anarchist Dan Arnold, your host. Tune in for what's really happening every Thursday. That's Thursday at 9 a.m. in Studio A on Revolution Radio. They keep us in fear to manipulate us. They want us ignorant so we're easier to enslave. They make us murder one another so they don't have to do it themselves. Only you can break their mind control by healing the contradictions within your belief systems that allow you to accept their lies in the first place. The time has come for us to remember our divinity, who we really are, to return to what we are meant to be, a service to others, to return to nature, and to reclaim our birthright, that which is freedom. The truth will sound belligerent because it is in direct opposition to lies. So get angry, because anger is sacred, and together we can unite and rise. Rise from this darkness. Humanity, assemble.
Do you want to really get to the roots of good health and stay strong for the storms ahead? Then listen to Bridget's Well, Healing with the Elements of Life. Tuesdays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio A, where stories are shared about traditional foods, Chinese medicine, and simple, healthy living skills. Listen to Bridget's Well, Tuesdays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, Studio A, right here on Revolution Radio.
Join Revolution Radio every Sunday at 5 p.m. Studio B for Strange Universe. Strange Universe.
All right, thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Okay, welcome to Free Association. Listening to Revolution Radio, Studio B. My name's Dennis. I'm your host for the next couple of hours. The idea is that we just talk and link things together if we can, but just let the stream of consciousness happen the way it happens. I've got Lenny Time with me this week, and I've got James from the Spiritual High Table. Well, he's not here at the minute, but he was here 30 seconds ago. He was here, so hopefully he'll be back. But say hello, Lenny. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. I'm looking forward to another 2-hour stint on Revolution Radio because it's the place to listen to all sorts of ideas. Whether they're good ideas or not good ideas, that's for the listener to decide. But I think you and I come up with some pretty good ideas when we're talking on this show.
Yeah, we tend to. So I don't know whether James is coming back. He might have some technical issues. Karen's got a client this week, I think. She sent me an apology. So I don't think Karen will be with us. So it might just be me and you, Lenny. But if James comes back, we'll welcome him back here.
It's a hard world when you have to rely on being able to make money in any different way than what you're normally set up to do. And I say they, but I wonder who this nebulous they is that controls everything. It's sort of economics I was taught was an invisible hand that balances things, but in reality, it sure looks like it's a rigged job where once you get elected, you can get insider information and deal with the world on different footing than just us normal people. Morning,
Yeah,
James.
certainly. Are you with us,
Sorry to cut
James?
you off. He's on mute. He'll figure that out.
Yeah, he's got some technical issues. I love it. Yeah, it certainly helps if you know people. I've discovered that. Well, I don't know very many people at all that are in any way involved in power structures and politics. I know one guy who's a friend of mine who's a local councillor, but that's about it really. I mean, mother knows the mayor of Bishop Auckland, but that doesn't really help me here because it's 20 miles away.
Yeah, back in the 1990s, when I was just starting in the working world after finishing through the education world, I got involved with Ross Perot and the American Party and then the Reform Party, what it became. And Ross Perot was an interesting guy. He was a mega billionaire, the sort of Bill Gates of his time. And he didn't like either of the two parties, so he started his own. And he was running for president on his own, and people just came out of the woodwork. And I was part of the campaign, and people would hand me money, and there was no real accounting for any of the money. It just grew because people were behind Ross and wanted him to win. So he got up to about 20-30%, and then the press attacked, and they released news that he had canceled his daughter's wedding because aliens had come to talk to him, and he was withdrawing from the race. We come to find out about 6 months later that the Washington folks that run the elections, the whatever it's called, they told him that if he couldn't control his finances and give accurate recording, they were going to throw everybody in jail, all the treasurers and row. And so he backed out of the race, reorganized how the money handling worked, came back 2 weeks later, but the momentum was gone. And if you remember that race, it was Clinton versus Bush, and Perot did get 23% of the people, which is huge for a third party. And in many states, that established the Reform Party as a real party. So we had elections and ran people, and I was actually on the board nationally, one of 150 people who traveled to places like Nashville and Detroit to have an annual meeting to talk politics. And the next time that we decided to run Dick Lamb, who was governor of Colorado at the time in 1996. And suddenly Ross, who is no longer the candidate, decided he wanted to be a candidate. And he was not going to beat Lamb, so they invited in, oh, now the name slipped me, but he was a Republican from way back, Pat Buchanan. And so Pat Buchanan, Dick Lamb, and Ross were the three presidential candidates running for Reform Party candidate for president. And we had a real good time, but Buchanan brought in dirty tricks with him, and they undercut Lamb and worked out a deal where Buchanan at the end threw his forces to Ross, and Ross got nominated, but the party wasn't behind him. And so he didn't even get close to the 23% he had got the previous time. And it left the Reform Party blowing in the wind. Well, you know how Washington works. There's only room for two parties, and a third party might actually cause them to get something done. So I had my fill of politics by about 2004. I had gotten up to where I was the state treasurer for the state of Oregon, but the party wasn't going anywhere, and so I closed my interest down and decided that I would support local politicians who wanted me to vote for them in local races, but I wasn't going to participate in the politics at any grander scale. And I've just watched the mess we call politics grow and grow and grow to the point where we as humans need to find a better way of regulating ourselves and ensuring that we don't have a two-tiered system where some people get insider information and can make mints, and everyone else has their wages tied to their workload, which doesn't seem to work because you can't get enough hour salary to really make it to the millions part. The only thing that makes money seems to be money, and that's a real problem with the world today.
Yeah, it's an issue that I don't have a solution for, but I'm sure we've got 2 hours to find one. So we might get close in the next couple of hours. Welcome along,
Yeah,
James. Are you with us now?
Yeah, I seem to have sorted my audio problem out. It was going through a different channel, so I had to go into settings and sort it out. I do apologise, guys.
hey,
No
not
worries
your
at all.
problem. Oh, yeah. It works the way it works, and there's always problem getting onto the radio when you're saying something that the powers that be don't want to hear.
I totally agree with that, Doc. Yeah, it's normally the case, isn't it, really? So, yeah. Anyway, carry on, guys. I'll catch up with what you're talking about. It seems to be about money and money making and the way the money flows and works. I got the last little bit of what you were talking about. I missed the first 10 minutes. So you guys carry on and I'll chip in once you get going.
Yeah, well, we're back to money again. So it's a recurring theme with me, and a recurring theme with Doc Time as well, I think.
Well, Doc has figured it out so that the idea on how to accumulate money is to not worry about it and let it accumulate. And if you're chasing it, somehow something comes up that takes your time and energy and doesn't give you money in return. But if you just forget about it and do what you're going to do, somehow the money appears in the accounts and you get what you need to get your project working. It's only the people who stress on making the money who have a hard time gathering money.
Yeah, because worrying about it is resistance. So you're resisting your own flow if you're worrying about it.
Yeah, it's just a currency. And if we take current and move into the world of electricity, it's the current that flows. And so if money is like electrical current and flows, the important thing would be to get it distributed to everybody and widen the way that it flows, not pack it up into a few couple hundred billionaires and let them play Monopoly for the rest of the world.
See, I've always
Yeah.
found getting money difficult, and you're talking about like having resistance to it and that. What do you mean by resistance? Because setting up the spiritual high table, I found out that I need a money income to run the system that I want to run, but I don't really want the money. I don't really want to use money to do this. I want to do it free, so to speak, without any financial assistance. But yeah, this money flow, it seems to be a bit of an issue for me personally. But yeah, it's weird that I must have a lot of resistance to it, and probably.
You've just described the resistance. You said you don't really want it.
No, I don't really. No,
So you want it, but you don't really want it. So
no,
the resistance.
I need it. I need it, but I don't really want it personally.
So flip that around and start wanting it. Well, start feeling that you already have it is the way to do it. So the way to release the resistance. There's quite a few different ways you can do it, but the way that I do it is you start to just imagine the way you would feel if you already had the money that you need. So you know how much money you need to run that spiritual high table, or roughly speaking. How would that make you feel if you already had that in your bank account? How would that make you feel?
Well, it would give me access to start building more of the spiritual higher table. And like, you're borderlining on a law of attraction kind of thing, aren't you? Like imagining that you have the money and that you've already got it, and it draws it towards you. That's the law of attraction, isn't it? So, yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about that, actually.
Yeah, but the problem is you can't allow it in if you don't really want to.
So that's my
The only way
barrier.
to the only way you can allow it in is if you feel like you've already got it.
Well, I'm going
I
to have
don't
to start
know.
there.
I think sometimes that the focus on it causes part of the attraction and disattraction to it. It really, for me, when I was a hermit and trying to see if I could get through a whole month without spending a cent, that was difficult. And doing it month after month got me to the point where I actually finally made it. And it's funny because if you have change in your pocket, it spends. And so I had to learn how not to carry change around. Although nowadays I carry 42 cents in my pocket because the answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42. And so a quarter, a dime, a nickel, and 2 pennies allows me to get my 2 cents in if I need to. And it's just the right around amount of change to create balance in human life.
Yeah, I have a tendency these days to keep about 100 quid in cash around, which I never really used to do, but it helps to be able to see it. So keeping it in cash helps me for some reason. I can't speak for anybody else, but I've worked out a few things as I've gone along, and that's one of the things that help.
Yeah, I think working in cash makes you more mindful of how it goes. And part of the game they've played with us with taxation is to take that money away before we even see it, so it's not as if it ever was there. And it seems to me to be one of those ridiculous things that government can print as much money as it wants, but still insists on taxation and debt for we the people.
Yeah, I was going to go into that and say that money for me it goes mainly on bills, taxes, insurance, internet, everything, and it's gone before I've even got it. Basically, that's why money to me is a bit of a struggle, really. And I don't really keep cash lying around. I'm definitely going to be mindful about what you said, Dennis, about being more open to money. That might actually help. So yeah, I agree with Doc and Dennis on that one.
Try
Yeah,
not to use plastic at all. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I was just going to say, have you ever done any kind of emotional freedom technique or tapping? Anything
Yeah,
like that?
tapping. Yeah, I've used the tapping technique, not the emotional freedom. I haven't done that. Yeah, tapping, I've done that. That doesn't seem to help my money problems.
It will. It will. If you focus in on it, it'll help. It's not about wishing. It's about releasing resistance. So everything that needs to happen for you to get the money is releasing your own resistance.
And it's hard to do that because as you can see, you don't even realize you're showing resistance. It's one of those things that's an inbuilt quandary because they really don't want us participating in their world. So I don't want to participate in their world either. We're creating our own worlds. And attracting money to the world, or attracting prosperity, not money, because it's really the standard of living we're talking about and not the physical cash itself. But by not using plastic and doing everything in cash, it forces me to take note of exactly what I'm spending on what. And I don't budget at all, but I know how much I have and I look at the value of what I'm going to buy. And I also look at the desire of whether I want to have it. And by cutting certain things out of my habits at the grocery store, I was able to save a whole lot of money just by not going for those things that I really don't need, but somehow the advertising or the idea of it caught me at the time. A lot of it's just focus on willpower.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of that. There's a lot of things that kind of stick around from childhood. I mean, I don't know about how you guys grew up, but I grew up in a fairly poor household. My dad was in and out of work all the time, so we didn't have an awful lot of money floating around. And it sticks with you, that kind of environment. So I've kind of got that with me psychologically, whether I've got money or not. I've still got the environment that I grew up in as a child. So that's what I need to let go of, because that's what's stopping the flow for me. So I did a lot of work around that, around childhood ideas about money, and my parents' ideas about money, grandparents' ideas about money that I've taken on. And if you let go of all of that, then think and let go of your own resistance. So, as we said last week, money's neutral. It's not positive or negative. It's what you do with it that makes it positive or negative. So if money's neutral, there's no reason why you shouldn't have money.
I think the problem isn't the money so much as the psychology of the populace, that normal people expect to have normal lives, and having enough money from your work to pay for your bills, that's now taken as normal, but it wasn't. I mean, when I grew up, dad worked, mom stayed home with the kids, and they seemed to have plenty of money. But when I was really young, prior to 5 years old, I had my grandparents around. And three of my four grandparents were there for the Depression as teenagers or young adults. And so understanding where they were coming from and listening to how they did things gave me a sense of value that I brought into life, but never really saw that sense of value amongst the people who were busy chasing money to pay the bills, to go to work to chase money. It's a cycle, and they've looped it pretty nicely. And the way to get out of it is to find something else to participate in that takes all your attention, so that you're not even paying attention to what's going on. But I don't know. I think we're all going to get out of it real quick, because I think it's falling apart faster than they can hold it together. And the duct tape isn't working. Supposedly, the U.S. is going to shut down because it didn't pass a budget. I think that would be one of the best things for the world if the U.S. government couldn't spend money for a little while. But then again, they're taking care of over half the population between welfare and Social Security. And if that money's not flowing, people are going to be angry real quick.
Yeah, that sounds like a complete disaster, Doc. That's not going to go well if they don't pass their budget, is it really? With me, with money, I was brought up in the care system, so we never really dealt with money growing up. We never had any interactions with it. We were given stuff that what we were needed when we needed it. So money only hit me when I reached adulthood and started being in the world and that, and using money to pay bills and that. And I think that's why I've not really had any money kind of like wanting skills really, and I've always been adverse to money, because I know you say money's just neutral and it just flows the way it flows, but from what I've seen, the people that do have money are terrible really. My wife's parents, they save money all their lives, but they say they've got no money. They sit there and say, oh, I've got no money, but in the bank they've got like 40 grand in the bank, but they've got no money. And I find this a lot with a lot of people that have money, is that they don't want to spend it and they don't want to help people with it. It's a terrible thing really, and that's my experience with money so far.
Dennis,
part of
why? Go ahead, Dennis.
So your experience of your parents and your parents-in-law is part of what's building your resistance. Well, you're not them. My argument is you're not the person that you see on other people being.
No, I agree with that. I'm not them, but it has caused me to be resistant to it. Yeah, and I do need to break that resistance, especially if I do want to start attracting money. So yeah, I am. I'm all ears. I'm listening. So yeah.
Go ahead, Lenny.
It makes me wonder what Now, I lost the thought that I had before, and I want to think and get it back because it was a good point that I was going to make. The idea of exchange of goods and services can't be done without the concept of money, because you can't trade a dozen eggs for a steak and call it a fair trade. And the investment of time and energy into people's professions has allowed those professions to demand a higher wage scale than normal working people get. And then we ended up somehow putting athletes on a pedestal and paying them as entertainers. And because the money that is generated in athletics and entertainment is a huge amount, you would think that the people doing the service should get a portion of that amount. And when they did, it threw a different balance skew into the game. In the 60s, when I was growing up, a baseball player had to actually have a winter job to make it because baseball just didn't pay enough. It was a game and a lark. But the idea of television money going to team owners to allow the players to be seen, and the way that the framework is set up, I mean, let's come up with a different sport, some sport based on knowledge, and release it on Rev Radio and have everybody pay a small amount to be part of the game, and that'll raise a lot of revenue. But Rev Radio is listener supported, and it's important that every so often you send some money to the station because they need it. And if you can do it regularly, that's great. But if you can't, you know how it goes. Sometimes you come into money, and Rev Radio is out there giving us voice. So always like to say good things about the group.
Yeah, they've supported me pretty well over the years. I didn't have a clue what I was doing when I first started on Rev Radio, quite honestly. And fortunately, the first few shows aren't recorded in the archive because they were terrible. They were absolutely terrible. But I did get better as I've gone along. So I'm grateful just for the opportunity to have the place to practice and make mistakes. That's part of what Rev Radio is, really. Is you take on a show and then you learn by doing the show.
No, I would like to say that as well. I'm grateful that I've been given the opportunity to be on Rev Radio, and I thank them a lot, and I thank you, Dennis. But I'm terrible at this already. You know what I mean? I'm just getting started, and I'm learning as I'm going. So, yeah, I'm just grateful that I'm here. So, thank you.
It is important for the listeners to know they have a voice. And so there is a chat room on Discord if people want to talk about what they hear, want to ask questions. We have a small chat within here, but to tell you the truth, everything could work better structurally if people would build the structures that they need instead of having to use the structures that are given. But kudos to Discord for being there to allow communications worldwide without physical costs.
Yeah, despite the arrival of Microsoft, they're still doing a pretty good job, I think.
Yeah. The tools that we use, we get used to using, and then when we don't have them, we miss them. But a lot of our discussions now take the individual out from his group of one and place him into a larger group to be able to hear voices. And I think that we're tapped into several different sources of information, only one of which is the human being here on the planet Earth, and that because of the way time and space work differently from the explanations we've been conveniently given as the basis of our development and understanding, I think we're going to learn that there's a whole broader context to what we call the universe than the microcosm here on Earth. And it makes me wonder sometimes if we can step back and observe ourselves, what we would do or what we would tell ourselves. But reality is such that I think there's more versions of ourself going on timelines on different scales where we've taken a decision point and somehow another world has appeared from that decision point that goes with the opposite way that the decision was made. And if of no significance, those two lines will merge back again. But sometimes we make a significant decision and it goes one way. This created world goes with the opposite decision and is like a parallel universe. And when the decision makes a difference in how the universe goes, it creates a real timeline, and your consciousness can only be in the timeline for the decision that you made, not in the timeline for the decision that you didn't make. But that timeline went on, and if that was a better decision, sometime down the road, your self will download its consciousness to understanding that you didn't necessarily develop in the first person singular.
No, I totally agree with Doc there. Multiple timelines and decision making, splitting the timelines. Yeah, that's a big conversation, and me and Doc have spoken about that before. And I totally agree with what Doc's saying, and I have the same kind of theory where that goes as well. And it's an interesting one as well. It's very interesting. So yeah, I'm glad Doc brought that up. Actually, to be honest with you, what's your opinion on that, Dennis?
I tend to slightly skeptical, but I'm slightly skeptical about everything. I have done some playing with the idea. Moving between timelines is something that I'm interested in, and it's something that I've done a little bit of. It's one way of looking at it. I don't think it's the only way of looking at it, but it's definitely a useful model of how things work.
Well, I think part of it is the understanding that you are in several different timelines currently that are overlapping and doing the same thing, but your focus is not necessarily the same on each of the different scales. But you can't run into yourself in time because time is a function of scale, and the generated world can be infinitely smaller than this one. Everything is normalized in our system to a human 24-hour day where we have learned the cycles. Sun comes up, you wake up. Sun goes down, you go to sleep. Some people, that's the opposite. There's quite a nightlife, I understand, but for me, if I can stay up much past 10 o'clock at night, I must have drank too much coffee during the day. But the idea is that if you do things that are unexpected, the expected will still go on, but your character who only does the expected won't even notice things that go on outside of what he expects. And so you look at different people and their self-expectation and the size of scale that they group, and I could see that group being constant through many known timelines because there's not much creativity and it goes on and on and on. But I'm working on a timeline where there's a peaceful resolution to everything going on Earth, because I think that the hate and the evil has been self-generated for entertainment purposes of a few. And if I just mentally acknowledge it's there and give it none of my emotional attention, it doesn't bother me anymore until people bring it up with me and want me to become part of the herd by agreeing with their absurdity. Whereas once it's presented to me and I have to think about it, I'm not very kind when presented with things. And so I don't have too many normies in my life presenting me with new, different stuff, but I do keep one or two around just for the idea of being able to get a translation of normie to Lenny information, because they say things that, because I haven't paid any attention to the television or the movies or the entertainment industry or the government or things like that for about 5 years, except when they flash into my attention sphere, things that affect me going on in my attention sphere, I tend to pay attention to. But gee, in my world, the biggest thing happening right now is there's a race between silver and gold, and silver's going to go over $50 before gold goes over 4,000, or not. But that's not something most people think about. I vote for silver. I think silver is going up faster than gold, but gold is an indicator of the value of the American money. And if it keeps going up like it is, 4,000 an ounce, that just tells you that the money's hardly worth anything anymore.
Yeah, I started looking at gold a few weeks ago. I still haven't really done very much about it, but I thought it's something that I need to start thinking about. I had a little bit of money in the bank that could potentially buy me some gold, so I thought I'd take a look. And
The
it's an all-time
problem,
high.
yeah, no, it's doing very well. You got to watch out though, because it's not fungible. Once it's in gold, it's hard to get the money when you need it out of gold. It's not commonly accepted, and there are fees for buying and selling. But despite those fees, I've made a huge amount on my gold and silver investments. I would not get what they're valued at if I wanted to sell them today.
You know, the company you're trading through is always going to take a slice of the profit anyway, so you've got to take account of that.
Yeah, and because the volume is low, they have to put a nice value on the turnover, but they get it coming and going, and they've got people who buy past their means and then have to sell it back to get cash to live on, and that doesn't seem to work. Although we might be at a cusp of history where buying gold and silver will pay off hugely, because the artificial money places like stock market and bonds that run governments, both of those I have to question whether they'll be around as investment vehicles, or even if they are at this point. Not many Americans can afford to own stock in the stock market, except if they've been part of the managerial class. And it's the managerial class and their decision making that really has screwed the pooch. It would be better if everything were local, or if everything were direct. But there's so many layers of insulation and the compensation within the parameters of what we have now is really a cutthroat competition to get to the top, and encourages the exact opposite of spiritual high table values.
No, I agree with that. That is true. Gold and silver. I've looked into like investing in silver, and I get reports from bullion by post, and silver only seems to go up 4% at a time. Gold, I've not really looked into because I can't personally afford gold. But yeah, you said, Doc, about silver, that silver would probably be a better option. But what do you mean by the fact that silver is a better option over gold? Could you elaborate a little bit on that one?
Well, one of the things is that silver is generally mined as a byproduct of copper, which is mined in a lot more volume. And it also tends to run with gold and some other metals, but there's no silver mines for silver directly. They all have multiple metals. The silver is used very much in high tech, and with converting over to solar panels and also getting finer and finer boards and computers and using material science to guide things. What's happening is that there's a physical shortage of silver, and just about every bit of silver that was mined was used industrially this past year. And so the value of the silver that has been in coinage is going up because of the scarcity of the silver in real life, because it's a necessary component. I have the feeling that a lot of the silver in the world is being purchased by billionaires who have reason to think it will increase in value even more. But I'm also thinking Elon Musk and his space stuff must eat silver alive in consumption to make the things that go into the rocketry and the telecommunications and the other stuff. So I also have heard that the Grand Canyon is a major gold mine. And if you look at the idea of giant beings once populating the world, the Grand Canyon as just a strip mine could make sense, but there's reasons they don't let people there, and they tend to foster speculation that there is way more gold in the world than what they tell us, which would, of course, kill the value of gold if suddenly there were 4 times as much available. But it's funny, you can go into the rivers here in the Pacific Northwest with a bucket and a pan, and you can collect a bunch of gold, maybe 1/10 of an ounce, 1/8 of an ounce. And if you have a gold detector machine, which they do have, you can actually make money to live on just by walking around and picking up free gold in the rivers, or trace it back to where the gold is actually originating from, and really have an operation. But California outlawed mining for gold and silver maybe 30, 40 years ago. So you can't really go to find gold and set up a mine. If you do, it's highly taxed and not worth your time.
Fascinating. That it is absolutely fascinating. That, yeah, it'd be good if silver does overtake gold eventually one day once it all comes out. So yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it?
My guess is that we're going to have changed over to a whole different way of doing things when the price gets to the point where silver is unaffordable but still necessary. It part of the problem is it's hard to recycle electronic components, but at some point people will go into landfills and dig up and pull out all sorts of circuit boards and soak the metal off the boards and recover it. One of the things of the current society is unmanageable generation of waste. And there's a couple of innovations like converting plastic back into usable fuel that would have taken place many years ago, except that the structure of corporations is such that they could buy up competition and just file it in their cabinets and not let it happen. And the patent system itself is totally corrupted. So a lot of things are corrupted and we need to do them better, but they're the only way of doing it that there is at this point. And so even to propose that we try something else sends normies into epileptic seizure.
Yeah, I had a conversation this morning with my mother about the world in general and how everything she's listening to is propaganda, and she couldn't get that. She couldn't let go of the possibility that the BBC might be lying to her.
Yeah, and fact is the BBC is lying to itself, and the basis set for what we actually believe we haven't questioned in so long that people don't think you can question it. And a lot of things are not falsifiable. There's no way of figuring out one thing from another, because to be falsifiable, you have to have a way of telling if something is true or not. But information doesn't flow linearly, and life as we expect it is supposed to flow linearly. So there is a big fundamental basis problem in the assumption of linearity when in fact we could be on an exponential without a problem. And at this point, I think we are, because as they say, everything that can go wrong will go wrong and it'll get fixed. But when it all goes wrong at the same time, there is no fix. You just step back and watch it collapse and then pick up the pieces and go home.
In media studies, we were told that depending on the organisation that's presenting the information, is their take on the information. It isn't going to be real, it isn't going to be true, it's just their idea and their take on it. So it is all propaganda, it is all messed up, the information, and it isn't linear. You know, you can have one TV, like the BBC, saying one thing, and then you can have Sky Sports saying the complete opposite, or it's News, sorry. So yeah, it's all about who's presenting the information, from what I've been told.
Yeah, it's knowing that and knowing the difference. That's the important thing. Once you know that there's a spin on it, then you can make an allowance for the spin and try and get to what's underneath what you're being told. But if you don't know there's a spin on it, it's like my mother sits and absorbs everything on the BBC News. Her worldview is basically that of a Daily Mail reader, because that's the newspaper she reads. So the conversation I had this morning was very much about me having a conversation with a generic Daily Mail reader rather than my mother.
An interesting perspective to look at it. I was glad that I got to spend 6 months with my mom in the year before she passed. And she was like that also, with the television turned on and certain shows that she had to watch at certain times so that the focus of her belief system was everything that she thought it was. And me living there it wasn't correctable. She tried to bring me into her system and I rebelled, because for me to be in her system would have been like me being a child again, because that was the relationship we had when I lived with her and knew her. This was the second time within 5 years I had gotten to spend 6 months with Mom, and so I knew what I was getting into the second time. And a lot of it was changing the relationship between the parent and child, so that now the child, grown up, middle age, is the parent, and the parent is like a child because they're no longer capable of doing the things they expect to be doing. So walking away from a hot stove where you're cooking and letting the food burn, and little things that tell you that, yeah, maybe you can't do it all by yourself, but the independence is taught, and the loss of independence for getting older, it's strange. Now that I'm in my latter 60s, I'm starting to lose words and come up with thought blocks where I know what I want to say, but I can't figure out how to say it. And so interpretation is a personal matter. And if you can't express yourself to where people can interpret what you're saying to the point where you can converse, I feel bad for people who age to that point. But I can see where it comes from, because I can see starting to miss stuff. And it used to be that my memory could hold anything, and that I could go back and recall the past almost verbatim. And that's why I never had any problem studying for tests or stuff in school, was because, hey, if I read it in a book, I could imagine the book, see the page, read it, and put it on the test. But knowing how things work within that system was part of excelling in that system growing up as a kid. And when you find that the system that you grew up with as a kid isn't a valid system, but there's no other system that you can use, it's disheartening. So if we're coming into something that's going to be completely different from what we have now, I think it's important to get the kids involved and listen to their ideas and teach them accurately information that has now been put off to the point where I think you could do the entire education process for a kid in 6 years instead of the 12 that it takes. And if you did it in 6 years, but kept it to really self-driven education, and don't limit it to 6 years by any stretch of the imagination, but allow people to go at their own pace and learn to what they're interested in, then I think we're good. I think we're going to break.
Yeah, we're just about to, after the music come in. So thanks to both of you for the first hour. We've got about 5 minutes, so you've got time to have a look at the change.
See you after the break, guys.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Through everything, we have to remember that we have more in common than not in common. And to find this common ground, tune in to Conversations with Eagle Flower, Wednesdays, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio A. Because we come to this table of life to learn in the best possible way and experience this gift of life from our mutual Creator. So let's learn together and build our best future with Conversations with Eagle Flower, Wednesdays, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Studio A on Revolution Radio.
Tune into Revolution Radio, Studio A for Omnium Gatherum, a kaleidoscope of discussion, Thursdays at 4 p.m. and Saturdays at 10 p.m. only at Revolution Radio. Tune into Revolution Radio, Studio A for Omnium Gatherum, a kaleidoscope of discussion, Thursdays at 4 p.m. and Saturdays at 10 p.m. only at Revolution Radio.
Mountain High Time, 2 hours of an organization to the madness, discussing the ever-changing dynamics of being both physically and mentally prepared for a plethora of possible outcomes to our future and present. A look into the latest technologies, new scientific discoveries, and how they might be used in connection to the human domain and controlling it, ancient cultures and places. Be warned. This is an opinionated look through headlines. Guests that are not afraid to question the narrative. A little bit of crazy ramblings of a stoner conspiracy factist that pushes constitutional concepts. The place and the time are the same, another dimension we call Mountain High Time. Saturdays 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Mountain High Time. Right here on Revolution.radio, where information never sleeps and truth breaks the spell.
Are you angered by the injustices inflicted upon the innocents of the world? Do you have a message you'd like to share? Any knowledge you'd like to impart to those willing to learn? Have you ever listened to our shows and thought, hey, I could do this, but you just don't know how to kickstart your hosting ambitions? Or, are you an established professional host, thwarted by censorship in other areas, seeking pastures new? Contact us here at the world's #1 free speech network, Revolution Radio. We provide the platform, the training, and the airtime to any budding host wanting the chance to take those first talk show steps. Established hosts can find a safe and secure home here, where their message can ring out loud and clear, unencumbered, free from sponsorship overreach. Drop us a line via our email, support@revolution.radio, or head into our Discord server to say hello. We'll take everything from there. Revolution Radio, where hosting dreams become actualized reality.
Are you a fan of rock and roll? Does it get your feet tapping and your hands clapping? Then be sure to check out Crypt Rick's Rock and Roll Hour every Friday night, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern and Standard Time on Studio B right here at RevolutionRadio.com, where we get down and talk all things rock.
I want to thank everybody for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the one place where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
All right, let's show them what we got here.
Thank you for waiting while we took that short break. Now back to Robert Morningstar, here at Revolution Radio.
All right, I'm definitely not Robert Morningstar. My name's Dennis, and I'm your host for Free Association for the next hour. We've got guests in the studio with me. I've got Dr. Lenny Time, and I've got James from the Spiritual High Table. We're kind of on an open discussion, so we'll just carry on where we left off, I think. I was thinking during the break about my mental model of time, which if I'm idealizing it, it's kind of a spiral with a little bit of upward movement in it. So maybe like a funnel shape with a spiral going around it. I don't know whether that makes sense to anybody else, but you kind of go around in circles, you repeat yourself a lot, but you're moving forward. So the forward movement in this model is an upward movement.
So if I read you right, you're at the bottom of a funnel and your time frame is spinning around the edge of the funnel, sort of rotating. And if you look up vertically, it looks like what's in the future is the same as the past because you're on that one strip.
Yeah, kind of, yeah, but there's upward movement, so I'm allowing for change and allowing for like new ideas and new ways of doing things in the upward movement in the funnel.
Your decision making is your relationship to what you get in the funnel, and everybody has their own individual time frame, and it's collected together to provide a narrative within a paradigm. And the narrative is the way the story goes. The paradigm is the setup for the story. But each time you go through that paradigm, your decision-making process is a bit different, and you make some different decisions so that by the time you get towards the top of the funnel, you could have made 100 decisions that each one puts you into the space where you ended up now. But if you had made any of those decisions differently, you'd be in an altered space around the funnel. And because there's so many different functions of scale, realistically, a function of scale is from 1 to 1,000. And by the time you get to 1,000, you have gone 3 orders of magnitude, and things start changing at that point. A lot of what we have in time happens because of physical adjacency, and we get today because yesterday went like it did. And if yesterday had changed and done something else, waking up today, we'd be in a different thought pattern and going slightly different direction. But we're used to routine where we always do the same thing each day. If we can, we get into the patterns like work and weekend. And anybody between 20 and 60 years old knows that work is one way of keeping yourself, and weekend is the way of letting off the steam from the work week, and you get trapped in that sort of cycle. I think the calendar as it's set up is a time trap, and that by everybody following the same calendar, we lose our ability to actually expand and contract time. I think that, like the first hour of this show, seemed like it took about 10 minutes. And it's because we were in the moment, we were having a good conversation, time went very fast. If you want time to go real slow, put something out there that you're excited to get to and get into the waiting place where you're waiting for it to happen because it's too far out there. And sometimes I get a lot done when I'm waiting for something that never does happen because I've lost interest by the time and effort that it takes to get out there. But I live in my own world with my own time frames governed by the clocks and calendars of what we have available to us. And I've often wondered, like, my cat's clock is different from my clock, and it's a function of the size of the two species, such that it seems like maybe every day I have is a week in her life. And so her patterns of repetition on a daily frame are different, but from day to day, I see the same behaviors. And the most important behavior in her world is this a comfortable place to sleep? And so I turned on the heater a couple days ago, and she found the heater, and sometimes she'll sleep in front of the heater. But I tend to think that the patterns that she shows are stuff that she's developed as her means of controlling me to feed her and clean the litter box and other things that cats make humans do. Cat time, yeah, it doesn't work like human time does, but we assume it does because they are there when we see them. But I don't know. I've learned a lot more about my cat now that I don't go anywhere and hang out with the cat all the time. Cats are interesting critters. They have their ways of manipulating us humans. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna give my take on time, and I think mostly time is a bit illusional on this planet. I think most of the time everything's measured, isn't it? Like the Earth going around the sun and the spin of the Earth, and we integrated that and cut it down, and we call that time in our world. But on a quantum level, bringing in quantum gravity and string theory and that, I think time is a completely different thing. Like what Doc says, it's multiple, when we make a decision, it splits time. We go off in branches and things like that. I think there's a lot more, although it's only theory at the moment, most of it, but there is a hell of a lot more to time than just living day to day, experiencing what we're experiencing. So I'm an open book on time. I don't have a definitive idea about it. I have a lot of theories about it, but yeah, that's my take on time. And yeah, I agree with you, Doc. I think animals and different species do experience time differently to us. That I can agree with you on. So yeah, that's just my quick take on time. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think a long time ago we were hypnotized by the cycles of the sun and the moon, and that's influenced pretty much everything in human culture. But it's hypnosis to some extent. I mean, it's a repeating pattern with a schedule, so it becomes the way you live. There's not much you can do to avoid it unless you don't go out, which point you won't know.
It is an illusion, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the hypnotic suggestion, a lot of it. But then everything, if you analyze anything, it turns out that it's probably some kind of hypnotic suggestion from somewhere else that you've just internalized.
How would that work in the realm of frequency, Dennis?
We could be getting into the realm of frequency now. Let's have a conversation about frequency for the next 45 minutes or so.
Yeah, because time and frequency are very much related. And by having a sense messed up in time, it alters my comprehension of frequency. But if I get attuned to certain frequencies, I tune out other frequencies that I'm not paying attention to. And I think part of control is developing inconvenient frequencies and keeping people there. And so we changed from 432 hertz to 440 hertz as a basis for music sometime in the 60s. And boy, you can feel it. The music resonates against your feeling of trying to lower your frequency. I I think it's more important to lower your personal frequency than to raise it, because when you raise your frequency, you get to an excited state. And so building a low frequency place of stability where you can essentially calm your resonance and then look forward to moving into a higher frequency world of exchange, that each each comp each complexity of the world as it hits you causes your frequency to raise a little higher. And when you hit a frequency of excitement, it requires you to blow off that energy before you can get back to your ground state. So frequency related to time, something's wrong there. The time and frequency can't be defined in terms of each other, and yet frequency is wavelength over time. And so the fact that we have limited resource with our abilities as humans to see as much as, say, other animals, because they have a wider wavelength capacity. Nature does a lot of different things, and humans get to miss most of it because we're not attuned to its scale. But I think there's some ontological changes coming out in the world that are going to require significantly different ways of thinking about things we never really thought about, like physics and philosophy. We'll see.
In the spiritual world, everyone is discussing the fact that we're raising our frequency. Everyone needs to raise their frequency to be able to live in the new world. And I'm skeptical about this, but yeah, look, with meditation and things like that, it's all about raising frequencies to be able to access different areas of reality. And I know Dr. said you need to bring yourself down in frequency, but a lot of it in spirituality is about raising your frequency, not lowering it. So it's there again. It's with time. I'm not sure how frequency would relate to time, but it's definitely interesting. Yeah.
Well, is that a way of manipulating the masses by increasing their frequency to the point where they're not coherently different from each other, and then brainwashing them with ways of thinking through and not allowing them to get to a good ground state where they can actually control their time?
I've never actually thought about it from that perspective, and you could possibly be right. Yeah, I haven't thought about it from that option actually, to be honest with you, Doc. But that's a good one. Yeah, I'm gonna have to think on that one.
One of the things I've tried to do in a personal sense is I've tried to live under a different calendar. And I have a 64-day cycle calendar that allows me a conceptual 8x8, a checkerboard or so, where my conceptual being from day to day is a function of where on the calendar I sit in the 64-day period. And so 64 days is called a grid, and every 8 days I run through a strong. And we called it a strong because 8 days in a strong is better than 7 days in a week. And the calendar repeats itself often enough that I can make plans on a scale of either personal scale or grand scale or intermediate group scale to get things going in my personal orientation of focus, because otherwise I'm scatterbrained and don't focus, get too much on my plate and can't focus on any of it. So I've taken the time to clear plate and drop out of unfunctional dysfunctions of the world, and I find myself reading novels in science fiction and action adventure areas, and seeing that the plots of those novels are what's passing as news in some way in our daily lives now. And so the orchestration of books to video has taken place, so that there's a lot of people who don't think they have to read the book. They got the story from the movie. But if you've read a book and then watched a movie and gone home disappointed because the movie butchered the book, that's how information translates. And so by moving to a calendar of my own and trying only to keep time on the regular calendar to make sure I make appointments, like this morning, 9 o'clock, be on Revolution Radio to have a conversation with Dennis and James. And that I'll use the regular clock for, and it keeps me tied to it. But to step out into a model reality of not being on that calendar, I wonder if we could do it as a role play game over the internet. It might be interesting to attempt, but in reality, if you're not paying attention to what they're pulling, you're getting suckered into it. But if you really don't have any idea what's going on because you're not paying attention to what they're saying, I think you're in a good space, because I think most of what they're saying is wrong. Anyway, I've been yammering.
No, you're absolutely fine, Doc. It's all good stuff. I think one of the things I'm thinking about, the idea of everybody's been hypnotized by something. Probably been hypnotized by a dozen different things over the course of my lifetime. So maybe I should just make a list of all the things I've been hypnotized by, and see what relationship that has with how my life turned out. So I think that would be an interesting exercise. I'm not going to do it on air, but I'll do that. I'll get a pen and paper at some point and sit down and work it all out.
The only time I had... Go ahead, Jim.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I'm going to do that exercise as well, because I think there's a lot that has been very hypnotizing throughout my life, and I think making a list of it all and then letting it go mentally might open your mind to a bit more, a bit more things. That could be really a good idea, actually, Dennis. So I think I'm going to follow that idea. Go ahead, Doc. Sorry.
I went to a conference in the 1990s at one point, and the entertainment on Friday night was a hypnotist, and I lost that weekend totally. Sometime Sunday morning, I woke up in a park in the town where I was, not having remembered the past 48 hours from Friday evening when I saw the hypnotist to Sunday morning at about 11 in the morning. And at that time, it freaked me out, but I didn't know certain things that now I know that could explain what was going on. But it seemed to be an out of worldly experience, and one of the things that helped me start coming up with my own theories of how time works. And we have created linear time with our definitions of seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, and years, to the point where it's inconceivable to most people that time doesn't really work that way, and that it's an exponential function, not a linear function, and that the physics of scale require time as I don't know, because rate is totally dependent on time, and yet when you measure how fast something happens, the rate at which it is going, it's a function of the scale of the measurement. So different devices do the same things on different scales because physics doesn't scale up like they've taught us. Wow. I don't know, Dennis. I'm too deep in my logic now. Is logic part of open philosophy?
Logic's part of it, but letting go of logic's part of it as well. I don't know which is better, but it doesn't really matter which is better, but you've got to be able to do both to really function properly. You've got to be able to let go of all the potential for cause and effect, and all the potential for, because cause and effect could be hypnosis as well.
I could use my imagination and come up with explanations for things that I did not understand and hadn't looked in depth at. And over time, I became good enough at my own evaluation service that when I finally got to the level of high school and learned how things actually worked, they worked differently than what I had come up with based on my understanding of life from the steady perspective of a child. And so I replaced my understanding with the understanding that school taught me how to understand, and used that logic to go further, never considering that the way I had come up with it was probably just as correct and didn't need to be set into the sterile framework of the education environment. Then I got to believing what I was taught for a while because I could see it didn't work, but hey, I was going to give it every opportunity to work for me. Now, I can do things through thought process and assumption that if I tried to ask for permission and do in physical reality, I'd never be able to do. So creating your own plane of existence is not something that can't be done, but it does require losing touch with the abject reality of what is learned presence. And when you stop acting in learned presence, the normies freak out on you. So I don't want to deal with normies anymore. I want to go back to being a hermit, but that won't quite work either.
I believe in being an open book, Doc. You know, like there's so much going on, and like with science and physics and that, it's like there are millions of theories, you know, and none, you know, you can't say it's correct until it's been measured in science, can you? So, you know, but I am an open book. I take everything in, I analyze it myself, and I try and compute it all and put it into perspective. But there's no definition really for anything. Everything's an open book. I think life in this world, on this planet, is just one big learning curve that we do our whole lives until the day that we pass and move on, or whatever happens when we do. So yeah, it's just one big learning curve.
I tend to just take a skeptical approach about everything, but not too skeptical, because if I'm too skeptical, I'll talk myself out of everything I've just started to believe. That takes about 6 months. So I'll go from believing one thing to believing the opposite in about 6 months.
A lot of times you develop your opinions from the superficial knowledge you gather by being interested in something that the real world has to mention. And because I no longer look at the real world or take any cues, sometimes people will put things in front of me that I have to watch and don't realize that what I'm watching is out of the media. And I gave it some real skeptical thought as to what could be going on. And I am convinced that the AI can now make it so that historical accuracy based on time and photography, motion pictures, and other things could totally be jobbed by the AI and changed from what we actually had to what they want us to believe we had. And so the physical reality of space demonstrated through things that can't be that are, which are called Mandela effects, although I think we should call them mandala effects, because that demonstrates how the magic actually works in the system. But science denies magic, and alchemy used to use magic to develop science. But science is a thought process that if you administrate the way it should be administrated, should not have a hierarchy. But life has a hierarchy, and scientists, to get to be scientists, have to publish papers in journals that explain their science to other scientists in terms that those other scientists know and understand and accept as common reality, except that the whole system of common reality can be jobbed by the underpinnings that when you look something up, it tells you something that's not accurate. And if you know it's not accurate and you start digging deeper, you find there's all sorts of places where the information has actually changed. And the stuff I know isn't so much anymore. And Kit Kats don't have a hyphen. And all sorts of different things that are part of the illusion of reality, where you can tell that it's the Truman Show and we're Truman and we have just found something to poke our curiosity, and we realize that everybody is watching us. And just because they're watching us doesn't mean we're paranoid, but we're paranoid because they're watching us. And so, I don't know. The illusion of reality is buried somewhere in the messages of the media that we've been fed over the last 50, 60, 70 years. But, gee, it doesn't work the way we've been told. And we're still missing something crucial to our comprehension of how things actually work. But it has to do with time, and it has to do with energy. And the relationship between time and energy is expressed as frequency, and frequencies are resonant as a function of scale.
Two sides of the same coin, basically.
Yeah, I work on I was thinking about the idea of all of these mental models that I describe, which are useful for me because they help me understand things. They can become hypnotic if you get too attached to any one model. I think it's useful to be able to flip between models, but so that's my skepticism kicking in again.
Hey, Dennis, can I change the topic and ask you a question to tell me and James and the audience what you know about Neville Goddard and his work in general, and something about his philosophical beliefs?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I'm not an expert, but I've read the book and I've listened to the audio books. And one of the things you've got to be careful about with Neville Goddard is there's a lot of artificial intelligence generated content, some of which is quite good, but it's all in different language to the way that Neville used to use examples and things. So if you can stick with the book. So the books that I remember are Feeling is the Secret is the main one. So it's about the law of assumption. You were talking about assumption earlier on, and I think you've picked up the same idea. It's about making assumptions about how you want life to be, and then feeling the way that you would feel if those assumptions were true. So you're creating your own truth in a way. You're creating your own way of being, and then everything else on the outside. So the key is that the cause is mental or psychological, and the effect is physical. So you can't change anything on the outside unless you change something on the inside, because the cause is the psychology. That's where it ties into Hermeticism a little bit. So in Hermeticism, they would say that all is mental, and Neville Goddard would probably agree with that, I think, or at least in some sense, all is mental. But the physical world looks like it's different. It looks like it's got more validity to it, but actually you can change it by changing what you do on the inside and how you feel about yourself. So a lot of what kind of Neville Goddard's about is about self-image and about self-identity. It's the way you feel about yourself and the way you think about yourself and the words you use to describe yourself internally, psychologically. That's part of your resonant frequency. So the emotion that's generated from those descriptors, from the way that you describe yourself, is part of your resonant frequency as well. Two things together are what makes up the signal you're sending out to the universe. And then the universe responds by giving you what you're asking for, because in effect, your resonant frequency is a prayer. It's a request. It's an intention, or it's a demand. So psychic demand is another way of looking at this. So you're demanding something of the universe by the way you feel about yourself and the way you think about yourself. And the universe will give you that thing that you're demanding, even if you don't know that you're doing it, even if you're not aware of it. So as a child, you're probably not going to be aware of all of these things. You just go along with what people tell you. If people tell you you're smart, you think you're smart. If people tell you you're stupid, you think you're stupid. If people say you're a failure, people say you're a success, you start to believe them. You get hypnotized by other people's language. The key to dealing with what Neville Goddard teaches is to not be hypnotized by other people's language, to choose your own language, to choose your own feeling, and then just allow the universe to give you that feeling. So you're consciously creating rather than accepting other people's versions of who you are. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that does make sense, and it's taught in a lot of spiritual practices. And the actual act of prayer itself is demanding those, from the universe. So yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I'm going to have a look more into that. So yeah, that does make sense.
I think the whole idea of it almost seems that Goddard is in the thought of he controls his universe, as opposed to he is subject to the universe of others. And what years was he alive?
He died in the early 1970s, I think. So he was around from about 1925, something like that, mid 1920s. He was grew up in Barbados in a large family, and they're very Christian. It's the way the language he uses is quite Christian, which I'm a bit resistant to, but I've got used to it because he's describing things that I can see in other places as well. So he's using a Christian and Old Testament language, but what he's actually doing is describing things that are psychological processes and using the Bible to make it more real for people, because in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, when he was doing his thing in Carnegie Hall or wherever it was he was teaching in New York, obviously it's a Christian society, so that's the language that he was using for people because people understood it. So I've got used to the Christian language and I've got used to the biblical references. There's not just Neville Goddard though, there's a whole New Thought movement, which includes people like Emmett Fox and Thomas Ford, both of whom talk about the same thing but use different language. It's not as Christian with Thomas Ford, but Emmett Fox was very Christian. Neville Goddard's very Christian. Ford was in India for a while. He was a judge, I think, in India, and he uses more kind of Hindu language. But they're saying the same thing. Ultimately, they're saying it's the same approach. So you can pick and choose between them what you choose to listen to and you'll get to the same place, I think.
Interesting. One of the things I had decided to do in working on my new way was to turn off the cacophony of people telling me to think in a certain way and thinking through a lot of the basic structure of nature and working towards how intricately involved everything is and everything else. And humans are part of nature, but because we've taken ourselves off into a human-derived world, we've lost a lot of our ability that we ought to have because we're not dealing with nature and its broad array of realities. So I've been farther out in the woods for living. Right now, I have trees around, and the walk into town brings me past wildflower fields. And so I think I lead a very nature-induced life that's different from the urban and suburban environments that most people get to deal with. So I'm out of touch with their common reality by shedding the common reality and letting it go off without paying attention to it. In a way, I'm forging a different reality and will bring in people as they come about to have different roles in questioning everything we know and coming up with ways of knowing our basis set so we each have the way we think to fall back on. And if we get enough people who can broaden the perspective of the group, we can deliver informational news broadcasts to people who on our wavelength would pick it up. And we're essentially doing that without calling it such, but figuring out how to go in the future is going to depend on the functional order rate of how the masses react to different stimuli in the quickly approaching future. And the starting conditions are totally important. And so when it starts, those conditions have to be proper or else it's not going to work. But fortunately, the way time works, it'll start and in some timeline, it will work. Maybe not the one we're in, but sure would be neat to get into the timeline where the transformation actually works. So we're still here and talking, and I wonder how many other timelines I've been eliminated from because they didn't want to hear what I had to say that made me even more effective in saying it in the timelines that I'm on now. Funny how those things work.
Yeah, I mean, in the Neville Goddard self-created reality idea, the way that you make assumptions and the assumptions that you make are absolutely the key to the whole thing. So if you make an assumption that you are capable of creating your own reality, and this whole thing is imagination creates reality. So it's like use your imagination to get to the place to imagine yourself in the place that you want to be, in the way that you want to be there. So it's about feeling the emotion and thinking the thoughts of that person that you would be. So in a sense, that's a different timeline. It's a way of switching timelines, because in one reality, I'm me on the 1st or 2nd of October, and in another reality, I'm me in 3 months' time with a different approach and a different attitude, and maybe some better health and an ability to walk a little bit further. So I found just simple things like visualizing being able to walk makes a difference to how I walk. I become less reliant on my walking stick if I visualize myself walking without the walking stick before I do it. Very simple things that people just don't really think about. But I'm discovering these things as I go along, and if I can walk for 20 yards without using the stick, because I've imagined myself walking for 20 yards without using the stick, or just by putting the stick down to keep my balance or whatever, without actually leaning on the stick, then if it can do that in like 10 minutes, what else can you do with your imagination? You know what I mean?
They say consciousness creates reality, don't they? Thought, the creator. So yeah, it's very important philosophy about that, and I think it's a very true philosophy, and it's covered quite a few subjects, as even like with money, opening your mind, letting your resistance go. Again, consciousness creating reality. So yeah, it's good for that.
I think that's the key. It's the key to the whole thing. I don't know what the limitations are. I know it's working for me in kind of getting better health slowly but surely. I don't know what the limitations are on moving my health forward with imagination. I'm working on generating more money so that I've got more freedom. I'm generating the freedom, really. The money's a secondary thing, but the money will help me get there. So I'm focusing more on the freedom than I am on the money. But I know that that's one of the ways that I'll get there. So it's kind of all interconnected, really. I've used Neville Goddard's techniques to generate places to live when I've had to move house a couple of times, and it's worked quite well in kind of situations like that, where if you've got a limited amount of time to find somewhere decent to live, you imagine it first. So get the parameters right first, get the structure right first, and then start looking. Wherever you look, you're going to find what it is you've created in your imagination, or an approximation of it, because you know what you're looking for. I think that's a key part of it as well. Is getting clear about what you're looking for, what you want in your life, and being clear about not all of the details, but some of the details. I mean, you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours working on minutiae of your life, but the more you can get precise, the more likely you are to find what you're looking for.
I wonder if I'm looking for anything or if I'm just treading water, waiting and watching for times that are appropriate to take action. A lot of times in the actions that I could take, there was a reason not to take those actions, especially since the weight of society is a bit imbalanced. But I think I've learned over time that if you give things time, time has a way of working things out. And now that I understand that we can operate in different frameworks, sometimes things have to happen within a time in order to demonstrate a learning lesson to us as individuals. And so I think we live in very interesting times, plural, and that what we're going to find out soon will change the common concept of reality. And I'm not saying whether it's going to be better or worse. It's just going to be quite a bit different.
Yeah, fortunately, I'm already used to quite a bit different, so one more step in that direction isn't going to make that much difference to me.
Well, you're a leader of the Quite a Bit Difference movement.
I think I probably am, Lenny, even without trying very much.
I look at it like we're just test cases for the universe. And as soon as we start feeling smug like we know something, it'll give us something completely different to think about. And we will successfully think our way through, and it will lead to better answers for problems that we didn't really get to yet. But fundamentally, it would be nice to sit back and just fundamentally look at how things change and the order of construct that we'll need to get a peaceful world out the back end. And I think that's what I want, is to be in a leadership position bringing peace into the world.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel as well, Doc, because I want to be in the moment, bringing peace to the world and, you know, helping with spiritual well-being and people's frequencies and working towards a better future for everyone. And the way the world works at the moment, it seems like a hard task, but I'm hoping things will change, and I'm open to change, and I'm hoping to work through it. So, yeah, it's here's to the future, guys. Here's to the future.
The thing about it being a hard task is it's not really, because you're only changing yourself in the paradigm that I've just described.
Yeah,
it's only you. It's only you that needs to change.
Yeah, agree with that. I've got to change my way of looking at things. Instead of building these resistant barriers up, I need to start being a bit more open and a bit more thoughtful about how I approach things. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
All right, folks, we're coming to the end of the show, so I think we've ended up on a high note, and I'll look forward to the next one. Thanks for coming in, and I appreciate your time and your honesty and your openness. Hopefully we can have another good conversation next week and tackle something in a kind of reasonably delicate and sensible way, but also have some fun at the same time. All right? That's it for me. Is there anything else you want to finish off with? Just let people know where to find you online or whatever.
No, we're rebuilding our website at the moment. I will provide that information once we've sorted it, okay?
All right, no worries. All right.
I'm at the same place as I always have been.
So that's Minds is where you're at, isn't it?
Yes, the Mad Doctor Time on Minds.com. And social media, what an interesting concept. Anyway, you have a great week, gentlemen, and I will look forward to talking to each of you again sometime soon.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, have a good one. I'll see you next week.
Listening to Revolution Radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning, warning.
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio!
The Secret Kindergarten is here for the young children of the world. The best program on the radio for kids, dealing with the most important topics in the whole universe. Fairy tales, music and movement, numbers, plants, animals, fun, colors, insects. Take care and cast your ears out to catch a story from the world of other young things. Read